seriously popular.
Do you have a recommendation?
I'm thinking I'm going to recommend Marks and Spencer's clothes.
Just generally?
Just fucking obsessed with them. Someone's on the loo. Welcome to the Life of Bryony, a podcast where we explore the messier parts of life with zero shame and absolutely fuck all filters. Is that okay? This week we're talking about something we will all have to face, but we all struggle to talk about, and that's grief. My guest today is Lottie Tomlinson. At 26 years old, Lottie's been through unimaginable grief, losing both her mother and sister in only 3 years. Yet she's emerged with a perspective that's both inspiring and refreshingly honest.
I went from this place of hopelessness to where I never thought that I'd be happy again ever in my life. I was convinced of it.
Lottie's story coming up on the Life of Bryony. So this week, I have been thinking a lot about my old friend Debs, or Dame Deborah James, as you might know her. You might have followed her on Instagram as Balbabe. And I met Debs because we followed each other. And a few years ago, I was doing this thing where I was trying to get as many women as possible of all different body types and body experiences to run this 10K in their pants with me through London. And as you probably know, Debs died of bowel cancer just over 2 years ago, I think, but not before making a massive difference in terms of her campaigning to raise awareness of this awful disease. And her legacy is the amazing Balbabe Fund, which continues to raise money to try and tackle this fucker of an illness. I'm a friend of the Balbabe Fund, and just go and look at its work. It's brilliant. Anyway, I was lucky enough to call Debs a friend, and I'm mentioning her now because it was her birthday a couple of days ago. She would have been 43. And I've been watching videos of her and looking at pictures of us. We used to run together. She was always much faster than me, but she'd wait for me. We'd run from Gales to Gales for cake, basically. And I've just been thinking about how life is so precious, but also so cruel sometimes. And the other day, I was walking past the Marsden Hospital, which is an amazing cancer treatment centre in central London that treated Debs. And I started thinking about all the people who were in there right now dealing with cancer, you know, the patients, but also the loved ones and the friends. And this episode this week is about grief and bereavement. And I just kind of wanted to acknowledge all the people out there who right now are dealing with this extraordinarily awful disease in whatever form, and who are having to kind of get through the grinding realities of each day while the world keeps on spinning. Like, I was walking past the Marsden, and then I walked past this newsagent, and there were all the newspapers, and I was like, I imagine there's people in that hospital right now who are like, how is the front page of every newspaper not the fact that my husband or my wife or my mother or my father or my daughter or whatever is ill with cancer? You know, this stuff really takes up an extraordinary amount of energy, and I just kind of wanted to say to anyone who might be going through it in whatever form, and the caretakers of someone going through it, you know, if you have a loved one who's going through it, I just wanted to say that I see you and I hear you, and I want to kind of send you a kind of hug in audio form. If you're listening to this and you're one of those people, if you're listening to this and you're going through anything difficult, that could be heartbreak, it could be bankruptcy, it could be anything hard, it could be a depressive episode. I just want to say this podcast is for you. It's, you know, it's your place to feel safe and to feel heard. Anyway, I was on Instagram a bit later, I suppose for like, you know, some mindless scrolling, because we must always balance the dark with the light. And up popped this reel featuring this actress I absolutely love called Denise Gough. She's this Irish actress who starred in this incredible play about addiction called People, Places and Things. And I follow her. And she had posted this reel of her reading out this poem. Now, I am not going to do it justice in the way that Shakespearean award-winning actress Denise Gough does, but I wanted to read it to you because it's so beautiful and I hope it'll chime for anyone who's going through something dark at the moment. And this poem is called The Thing Is, and it's by an American poet called Ellen Bass. To love life, to love it even when you have no stomach for it, and everything you've held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, your throat filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, its tropical heat thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than lungs. When grief waits you like your own flesh, only more of it, an obesity of grief. You think, how can a body withstand this? Then you hold life like a face between your palms, a plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, yes, I will take you. I will love you again. So that's a bit of a heavy intro, but I hope that it might allow you to feel a little bit of comfort. You know, you're not alone. And if you right now have had something unimaginably hard thrown at you, I want to tell you, you can do it and you will get through it. I had such a lovely chat with Lottie Tomlinson. Her story is one of resilience and growth, despite suffering significant losses at such a young age. In this chat, we mentioned the Sue Ryder charity. It's a UK-based organisation that provides extensive support for people dealing with grief, as well as those facing the end of life. Their services include online bereavement counselling and an online community for those grieving. For more information on Sue Ryder, head to our show notes. But for now, enjoy my chat with Lottie Tomlinson. Lucky girl. This is what we're here to talk about. Mm-hmm. I can't believe you're 26, right?
Yeah.
You had so much happen in your life.
Yeah.
How old were you when your brother became a superstar?
So I was like 12.
You must have been like quite cool at your school.
Well, yeah, so all of a sudden I went from like the shy, quiet girl with not many friends to all of a sudden everyone wanted to be my friend.
Because your brother's in One Direction.
Yeah, and it was quite a big change in my life.
Did that teach you a bit about, you know, whether people were authentic or not and that people were after you for certain things?
Yeah, I think it was quite a good lesson to learn because it taught me to be able to read people, and I think it's something that is like one of my strengths now is I don't really take any shit from people because I can tell straight away, you know, their intentions in a way. But I guess at that age it's quite hard to navigate as well. So yeah, there's pros and cons to having to deal with that.
So this book is called Lucky Girl. I think that a lot of people would say that you've been quite unlucky. On the one hand, you had this great excitement, you know, your brother's in One Direction touring the world. But in 2016, your mother died after quite a short illness. Mm-hmm. She was really young, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Is it
Johanna, yeah. Yeah, I think people question why I chose to call the book Lucky Girl, and they question why I feel lucky, but it's really been like the biggest reason I've been able to get through what I've been through is to be able to change that perspective in my own mind of like these unlucky things that have happened, trying to find like a positive out of that. You know, my mum died when I was 18 and she was so young and that was so sad, but also I had an amazing mum for 18 years and I've got all the lessons that she taught me.
Can you tell me a bit about her?
Yeah, so she was like your typical caring mum. She just wanted to do everything for us. She was really hands-on. She was a midwife, so she used to work nights and then she used to look after us. She had us in all the different clubs. Like she was an amazing mum.
So how many of you are there?
So there's 7 of us all together.
That's a lot.
Yeah. 2 sets of twins.
2 sets of twins?
Yeah. Which I just find baffling.
What was that like?
It was amazing. I think we've all grown up feeling really maternal, I think because of the big family. And just having that big family unit, obviously, especially going through what we've been through, it's been essential for us. We've had each other's support. It was just lots of fun growing up.
She was diagnosed with leukemia.
Yeah.
Was that kind of out of the blue? Did it?
It was quite quick. I knew she'd been ill, but it was like almost as if it was something minor. You know, it was like kind of cold, run down. Then all of a sudden she went to the doctors and found out it was serious and what it was. Obviously, it was so scary, but at the same time, we just held on to a lot of hope because she told us she was going to be okay. And I think looking back, that was probably a protection thing. She definitely wanted to fight it, but when I've looked into the form of leukemia that she had, I think the survival rates are quite low. It was a really aggressive form of leukemia. So, yeah, we held on to a lot of hope that she was going to get through it. And I think we still had that hope right up until the end when things quite quickly progressed. And yeah, she passed away quite quick.
It's so interesting. I think women often are we kind of dismiss our health, don't we?
Yeah.
And we down talk it. And you just referred then to her kind of doing that thing of protecting you, even when she was in this sort of very dark place.
Yeah, I think it was her way of coping. I think she didn't want anyone to know as well. No, so it was like just us. It was like quite a big secret, which we obviously respected because she was ill and that was her wishes. But at the same time, it's quite tough for us because we couldn't really lean on anyone.
But also that must have been really hard because if you have a quote unquote normal family where none of you are famous and you're all, you're living life and your mum becomes unwell and says, I don't want anyone to know, you still feel you can probably talk to like a friend about it because there's no danger of that spreading. Whereas there was a real kind of like chance that someone could tell someone in the press and it would get out.
Yeah, I think that's what was so hard about it because it was even like, don't tell anyone because that's going to get passed on. So it was almost like, and obviously, I think friends and close people were noticing something was up, something was different, and we were getting asked, is everything okay, blah, blah. And when she was ill, you can't do anything really to help, but her one wish was just, I want to deal with this privately. I don't want it getting out. I don't want people feeling sorry for me, which I really respected. She just wanted to fight it on her own with us. But then when people are asking, is there something going on? Are you okay? And you just having to kind of not say, it was hard because I think it made you feel even more alone with it.
You talk about you had 18 glorious years with her. Can you sort of talk a bit about towards the end of her life and the lessons that she sort of taught you in the way that she handled it?
I think the main thing, and I think it comes back to how I refer to myself as lucky because, she still felt grateful for everything that she had, and you could tell that even though she was ill and it was so unfair what was happening that she was having to leave us all, she still spoke of just being so lucky to have all of us kids. And, even at a funeral, she wanted the song The Luckiest played. And I just think that, it just shows her strength, and I think that's something she's passed to us. And it's just one of the lessons she's taught me that I've been able to take through my life. And, I'm so aware that a lot of people don't ever have that. Some people have their mum that's alive but isn't around, or they struggle with their relationships and stuff like that. So just being able to hold on to that is...
That you had a really beautiful relationship with her.
Yeah, it's just everything. It makes it manageable.
I mean, it is a really amazing thing to be able to do as well. I think that is a gift. It's really hard to put yourself in a place of gratitude.
Yeah, and I think that is something that I always like to talk about as well. I speak about the way I've been able to do that and change my perspective on things, but I also want people to know it's not something that happened overnight. This took me years to kind of get to this place.
Yeah.
If someone would have said to me, in the midst of it all, look at the positives, what do you not think you're lucky having these? And I wouldn't have said that. So I think it's important to recognise that, if people aren't feeling that, then it doesn't mean it can't come in time.
Okay. Don't shame yourself for not being
of course.
I'm coping with life. I'm the person that can see the light
and
in the
sometimes
dark.
I'm listening to myself and I'm like, myself in the start of this would have found that really annoying to hit. What's good about this? There's no positives in this situation. You can't see them at the start, but you can get there if you work on it.
So your mother died in 2016, just a couple of years after your mother died. Really tragically, your sister Fizz died of an accidental drug overdose.
Yeah.
I feel like we're talking about this and you've written about it in a book, but I've only just met you and I feel like it takes a lot of strength, Lottie, to be able to come into a room and sit down and talk about some really dark things that have happened to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, I just want to say, there's a lot of generosity of spirit that you are doing this, because I know talking about grief in this way will help a lot of people. So I just want to sort of...
Thank you. That means a lot. And I think it's taken me a while to get to this point, but another big coping mechanism of mine has been, once I did get to a more comfortable place with my grief, is to try and help people, because, I went from this place of hopelessness to where I never thought that I'd be happy again ever in my life. I was convinced of it. To then, years passed and I've come to a place where I found happiness that I never thought that I would have. And there's just something inside me that wants to show that to people, because, we lose a lot of people because they probably can't see that's ever a possibility. And so hopefully the book is like a bit of an example of that and a bit of hope for people.
If someone is listening to this right now and they are in the depths of grief, it's very hard to say it will turn out okay.
Yeah.
And life will get better and this will change. And also, I imagine, it probably, when people say that to you when you're in the depths of grief, it almost feels like a bit of an insult.
Yeah, it does. And you also sometimes feel like, I don't want it to.
Yeah.
I don't want to be happy again without that person.
Yeah.
And you feel guilty for that for a long time, and I think sometimes reassuring people that are feeling that it's not going to be, it might not be the life that you once thought you'd live. So I often have moments where I think my life would be so amazing with them in it. I still have that feeling, and it's like, of course you're always going to carry that, and you're always going to carry that, you always feel that piece missing, but you can also still be happy at the same time. So I think you just recognising that is important as well.
I get the sense that because you're from such a large family, did you almost kind of dampen down your grief because you felt like other people had more grief to feel? Or
Yeah, I think quite a good analogy is like when you've got your big family around you, it's like your shield. So like when we're all together, we can you're almost like blocking everything out. Whereas then, you're getting home and you've got to deal with it yourself. And there was a lot of layers to my grief, and it's quite an unusual situation to have two big grief experiences so close together, and also both as heavy as each other, Mum and then my sister. But it's also given me quite a lot of insight on how differently I dealt with things and different ways that I've coped. And I credit therapy a lot for the way I managed to cope, because I never had it with my mum. And then I had it with my sister, and the difference between those two experiences was really vast,
What was your relationship like with Fizz growing up?
So we were 2 years apart. So growing up, we were like your typical sisters, bit of a rivalry going on, but we were always, we always had that close bond. But, she wanted to do what I was doing. She wanted to borrow my clothes. It was just that typical sister relationship. And then as we got older, I think we saw the value in each other, and we really realised how lucky we are to have each other, and we really became best friends. And I think that's the hardest part about losing her when I did, because we just kind of discovered that. And I know it was a really special relationship cut short.
Also, the way in which you lost her was quite shocking.
Yeah, it was a big shock. And that's another big difference between the grief experiences, because, my mum had an illness. When someone's got cancer, although we held on to a lot of hope, your brain, your mind does go there. Naturally, you kind of prepare that could be a possibility. Whereas with Fizz, we knew she had struggles, but, we thought it was just part of the grief process. And, she was finally dealing with things. She was young. We thought maybe her age, she was hanging around with the wrong crowd. We never thought that would be the outcome of that situation. So there was a shock factor with that.
Would you mind, for anyone that doesn't know, I know this is like awful having to ask you, what happened?
Well, without going into too much detail, because I think the nature of her death is quite personal. And I think ideally for our family, we wouldn't have actually wanted that to be public. But because there was an autopsy involved, that did become public. And it's more of a protection thing for her. She was so young, and her issues were because of her grief, from mum, and she was so vulnerable. And I think we try so hard to try and protect that, because we haven't been able to in a lot of ways, because obviously, it was a big shock to me when it happened that literally everything that was in her system gets listed out to the public. Why does the public need to know that? But
it's another kind of layer to the grief.
We were all used to that aspect of our lives by that point, but it definitely made it harder because, like I say, it was such a was such a personal reason, and you just feel so protective over her. Like, I didn't really want everyone knowing that she'd struggled to that extent and, you know, turned to that kind of thing. But it was really just a really tragic accident, and I think she dealt with things a lot differently. So when Mum did die, we definitely noticed that her way of dealing with things was very different to us. We were more emotional. We seemed to be dealing with it more head on, whereas she seemed quite numb to it all. But, you know, we just put it down to different ways people deal with grief. But I think then, a few years on, it all kind of came at once, and then because she hadn't dealt with it at all, it was that painful that she kind of spiraled out of control.
I always remember someone talking about their brother dying of a drug overdose and them saying that afterwards people just defined him.
Yeah, I think that's it.
By the drugs. And she was like, we kind of have this desire as humans to box people in and describe them as addicts or whatever.
Yeah.
It's an amazing book called Transcendent Kingdom. And she says that, you know, that the real shame was on everyone who missed out, that he was so much more than just that.
Yeah, that rings true for Fizz as well. And I think that's probably a big reason why I try and protect that, because really that was just such a small part of her story. You know, it was a sad part of her story, but I never thought of her as an addict. It wasn't like that. It was a circumstantial thing as to why she'd turned to that stuff. And really, it was because she was in so much pain. It was a way of numbing it.
Numbing, but it always is.
Yeah.
We're so hard, aren't we, on people that use substances when actually they are people in pain.
Yeah.
And would we be hard on anyone else
who's saying they're in that much pain? Yeah.
Can I talk about how you dealt with it? Because I think there's going to be a lot of people listening who might want to know, how do you just get through the grinding day-to-day reality of grief?
Yeah, I think something I always say with the book is that I don't want anyone to think it's like a magic answer of how you deal with grief, because there isn't one. And everyone's grief experience will be different. I definitely think that the stages of grief are true. I don't know if, I don't think it's linear. I don't think that there's like 7 stages and everyone goes through each one at the same. But I definitely think we all deal with each stage at a certain point. And I noticed with my mum, because I didn't get any therapy or I didn't really speak about it, I think also growing up north in that kind of time and place, it wasn't a thing to like
talk about your feelings
or go to therapy or get counselling or anything.
What was the family attitude toward counselling growing up?
Well, it never really got spoken about with the family, but I remember when Fizz died, my close friend Lou was like, she was really into therapy, and she was like, look, why don't you just get some therapy just to help you feel as strong as you can? Like, you've gone through 2 really traumatic experiences. And I was like, why the hell would I need that? I've literally lost my mum and I've got through it myself. I don't now need that. And I was really against it. I was like, how can sitting down for an hour with someone...
What was your reluctance? Was it that you didn't want to kind of go into it anymore?
Yeah, I think it was like that kind of feeling of having to go in there and be vulnerable and talk about it. And also just like, it's a bit of a defence mechanism. It was almost like, it felt like it was a bit of an insult, like, you need help. And it's,
right, yeah.
You know, I think that's something that often puts us off. It's like people think that going to therapy means that they've got these big issues that they need help with, but everyone could benefit from therapy, I think, even if you've not had anything really go. Like, it's just something about having that unbiased opinion and having that hour or however long it is to talk about just you. Because in every other situation where you're talking to someone, you're naturally getting their opinion back and their thoughts, whereas this person is just there for you.
Are you naturally as well? I get the sense you're quite a caretaker. So you're quite a maternal person yourself, and we'll obviously get onto that. But I get the sense that you're probably quite good at looking after other people.
Yeah, I think it's obviously, like I've said, it's a maternal instinct that we've all got in the family, I think, due to being part of a big family. And also my mum was just the most maternal person ever. She had 7 kids. She was also a midwife. Obviously just couldn't get enough of babies. We'd be on holiday and there'd be like a family and she'd be asking to help with this family's baby. And I'm like,
Mum.
Yeah, she was just so maternal. And I think obviously naturally that gets passed through to us because we're watching her like that. But yeah, I think with the therapy, I just thought, I don't need it.
So what changed your mind?
I think it's just because Lou was kind of saying, she basically just said to me, have a session. I know a really good lady. Just have one and see how you feel. And I went and did it. And it was really weird because the lady that I had reminded me of my mum straight away. It felt right. And I was lucky because obviously I bonded with her. And I think if you don't, it can really change the experience. But it completely changed my experience with the grief of Fizz. I spent a lot of those 2 years before we lost Fizz with the grief of my mum, going through these cycles of bottling it up. I was fine for months, and then something would trigger me off and I'd just sob and sob for hours on end inconsolably, and it was just like the worst pain ever.
Really?
Yeah, and it wasn't healthy.
It's really interesting to talk about that. Is it 5 stages?
I think it's 7.
7?
But I couldn't even name them all.
I think we could have a go at it.
There's definitely denial in there.
There's denial, which is anger.
Definitely both true.
The last one I think is acceptance, isn't it?
And that's another thing that I talk about quite a lot. That's what I've noticed is when I've found peace is when I've accepted what's happened. And it's funny because you don't think you'll ever accept that, you know, your mum's not going to be here or your sister's not going to be here or whoever it is. But as soon as you do, it like lifts.
Really?
It's really weird, yeah.
So denial figured for quite a long time.
I think it was denial and anger was my biggest one that kind of, you know, the painful moments because you just feel like, why me? And I think in them kind of moments where I was going through these months of bottling up and then I would have these awful episodes of just being, you know, inconsolable. I think I was just so angry. Why my mum? Why can't I? You know, why has it happened to us or her? I think that is quite a hard stage to overcome.
Would you look at other people and feel sort of a fury at what?
Yeah, and also don't forget, like, losing your mum, reminders are everywhere. Your friends are talking about their mum. There's TV shows with their mum. It's always been spoken about, so it's quite hard to, you can't escape it.
Do you remember the first, like, Mother's Day without mum?
I don't even think I remember, like, the first one, but I obviously know the feeling so well of how that day feels.
And how does it feel?
Obviously now it's got a whole new meaning because I've got my own little boy, which has been, like, the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. Yeah, because you almost get a sense of that feeling back. You know, I've lost my mum, but I get that, you know, relationship with him.
Do you feel connected to your mum through Lucky?
Definitely, yeah. Especially because her firstborn was a boy, and like the whole thing, it just makes me feel close to her because it's like I'm experiencing what she did.
So how old were you when you had Lucky?
So I was 24 when he was born.
Right, so quite young.
Quite young, yeah.
But does it feel, I get the sense as well, that it feels like the most natural kind of...
I always wanted to be a mum. And my mum knew how much I wanted to be a mum. And that's one thing I always remember her saying to me when she was ill and we knew she wasn't going to make it. She said she wished she'd seen me have my baby. So it's such a bittersweet thing because obviously I just wish she was here. But like he's made my life better in every single way.
I think the thing people don't talk about often, we talk about grief of losing someone, but there's a different kind of grief, which is the grief, and you're kind of alluding to it now, the grief of losing the idea of a life that we were going to have.
Yeah.
And so that's mum holding her grandchild or Fizz being an auntie or... And how do you sort of process that? Because I don't think people do talk about that, do they?
No, and I actually think that's probably harder than the actual loss. I mean, obviously, you can't really compare the two, but it is such a hard element of the grief. I think that is what grief is, isn't it? It's like the life that you've lost and the experiences that you're not going to have. And there's always just that missing piece with big events that happen in your life. But it is really hard to deal with that.
How do you, as a family, remember and celebrate Fizz and your mum?
So obviously when it's birthdays or anniversaries, we always get together and we just try and make it a more positive day. Do you know what I mean? So, and just talk about them. I think that's really important. It can be easy to avoid talking about them because it can be so painful. You know, I've done work with Sue Ryder about trying to, you know, because even grief's still quite a taboo subject. And I understand why, because people are so scared to upset you, you know. Naturally, you just want to avoid saying it in case you set that person off. But often doing that actually has the opposite effect because I always find that I gravitate more towards people that do bring it up with me and do give me that space to talk about it, because it makes you feel less alone with it, you know. And so just keeping them in your mind and talking about them is important.
You're absolutely right that, especially in the UK, we don't talk about death.
No.
We are terrified of it.
How do we not? Because it's going to happen. It's literally the only thing that we know is going to happen.
That we're all going to do.
Yeah. And everyone is going to go through it.
What other things? Because I'm really interested in like the practical side of this. And obviously, as you've done this work with Sue Ryder, and I think it's really important for listeners as well. Like, what are the things not to say to someone who is grieving?
Right. So I think personally, this is the worst thing you can ever say to someone that's grieving, is that they're in a better place now.
Oh,
that person is never going to think there's a better place for them than with us.
Also,
the amount of times I've been told that.
Did people say that to you quite a lot?
I mean, it's not like obviously that common, but you still hear it quite a lot. And I see people commenting that to people when, you know, they're going through grief, and I'm thinking, no.
Don't say that.
Please don't say that.
Don't say that. Okay.
But also at the same time, I think it's important to recognise that there's always going to be something that someone says that might not feel good to that person. Even if you just say, you know, the generic, I'm sorry for your loss, someone might not like that.
True.
But it's still better to say something
than nothing at all.
But I'll still stick with, just don't say that they're in a better place.
Okay, so that's the one.
That's the one thing for me anyway. And I just think, is that ever really going to like make someone feel better?
Yeah.
The best thing that you can do for me is give them the space. So I would always say, would you like to talk about anything? Or do you want to just, you know, sit in silence? Do you want to have a cry? Do you want to, like, give that person the space, often letting them kind of tell you how they want to best deal with it.
And checking in.
Yeah, and continuing to. People kind of think, oh, it was 6 months ago now, they're probably fine. They might not want me to say it.
Well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? And I think this is important to say to people listening, is that they might feel, oh, I'm bothering them. I'm bothering them, and they are in there. And actually, I imagine people would rather be bothered than not.
Yeah.
And do you think it's also a really good idea, like, to send a message, go, just checking in, you don't have to reply?
Yeah. It's always going to be appreciated when someone's checking in on you. Like, my mum's anniversary is in December. It's going to be 8 years this year.
Wow.
And it still means so much just to get a message from them, people saying that they're thinking about me. And it's just...
Does it mean almost more the longer it is?
Yeah, I think it does. And like, even in certain situations, you know, if it is Mother's Day or I'm in a situation where there's kind of mentions of mums and all that, if someone just says like, are you all right? Like, just means a lot. It makes you feel less lonely. Because I think grief is loneliness, isn't it? A lot of the time.
Absolutely,
A big part of it is just loneliness. So having that lifted in any way just helps. I think the main thing is just, like, as hard as it is, just allowing your emotions. Because I think that's something that I really noticed as to why my grief with my mum was so unhealthy, because it was just block it out at all costs, because it is so painful. I think it's a natural instinct as a human to be like, if a feeling is so painful, block it out.
Well, you storing up grief and trauma is so unhealthy for you in so many different ways. We sometimes, I don't know about you, but when I was little, you know, like, your parents would always say, like, don't cry, you know, or don't be silly, and now, I don't know how you're like this with Lucky, but like, actually teaching kids that it's okay to cry, and actually it's actually a very healthy response.
I think that's so important, and I definitely do that with Lucky. I think it's mad how we get kind of taught that be strong, be tough. You know, especially the men, you know, it's a bit easier for us, but it's definitely hard to try and always feel like you've got to suppress your emotions.
So Lucky is 2.
Yeah.
And then in January we have number 2.
Yeah.
Can you say, am I allowed to say, am I like doing a gender reveal and ruining everything? You're like, Bryony, we have plans.
No, don't worry, I've already revealed that it's a little girl.
That's like neat and lovely.
I'm so happy. And funny story actually that I've not told anyone. So my sister has got a little girl, and she did an at-home gender test that started in America, and you order the kit, it's like 80 quid. And it comes with a little, you know, like when you've got diabetes and you have to...
Pinprick.
Yeah. And you squeeze his blood and you fill like a little thing and you send it off, and within a week it comes back with your gender. You can do it from 8 weeks. So obviously for people like me who is just unbelievably impatient, I was like, right. Anyway, my sister did it, and she got boy come back, and she did a big gender reveal party. Got to a 20-week scan and they told her it was a girl. bearing in mind I know this has happened and I know that she'd got it wrong, I still did it. I thought, do you know what? It's not going to happen to both of us. I literally sterilised the area, scrubbed my hands, followed all the steps. So I thought, there's no way this is going to be wrong. Comes back as a boy. So I was like, oh, I'm having 2 boys. Got to my 12-week scan, and obviously in the back of my head, I had that kind of doubt because of what happened to Phoebe. So I said to the lady that was scanning me, I said, we've had a blood test, like we know the gender, but can you just confirm if you can tell at this stage? And she went, I can guess about 80% accuracy at this stage, but it's a girl. I was like, what? So I was like, oh my God. And then 80%, you're still thinking like, is it a girl? Is it a boy? And I was like, right, I need to find out. So I waited till 16 weeks, had the scan. Girl. On the website, it says 99% accuracy.
Yes, but you Tomlinsons are the 1%.
Literally. And apparently it says that because not enough people submit that they've got the wrong result. So it's a bit of a con.
In my ideal world, were I Prime Minister, I'm not, everyone would be given like an hour of therapy a week.
Yeah, 100%.
But obviously provision's pretty bad. Also, people, as you say, as you were, might be quite reluctant to do therapy.
Yeah.
Are there any other little practical things that you found help you to kind of process your grief and get through it?
I think definitely looking after yourself in terms of self-care was a big one for me. I always noticed I was at a better place with my grief when I was exercising, having a routine. Also, for the people that can't access therapy, that's why Sue Ryder's so amazing, because they do so many different things to help the people that can't access it. Like, you know, you can get free sessions with trained therapists. You can also attend things like grief cafes that they put on. And I think that is so amazing for people just to go along and have a coffee and speak to people that are going through the same thing. You know, like we were saying, it's loneliness, isn't it? So having that, and I didn't have any clue about that being a thing.
But grief
I don't think many
cafes,
do.
I wish that there was more of this, because actually yesterday I went to my local swimming pool, and there was my daughter was pointing at it, going, "That's weird," at the notice board, and I went up and it said Death Cafe.
Oh wow!
And it was
Never
like, this was the interesting thing. This said, this isn't grief support network. This is for people who are dying and just want to get together and have a chat about how shit it is.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, yeah, there's not enough of that, is there?
Yeah, it's all of the kind of taboo things that we find really hard to speak about, isn't it? That there isn't enough support with. Being able to tell people, go on Sue Ryder website and, you know, look at what they offer, because they do offer so many amazing things. Obviously, leaning on people, I think it's easy to feel like you're a burden to people, but most people will be honoured if you're coming to them and saying, you know, I really appreciate your support. Do you mind if we go for a coffee and have a chat? You know, it's just like having the confidence to do those things. But I always say, you know, with the book and everything and with my grief, as much as I've got to such a good place with it and I've managed to accept it all, and I'm very lucky to be able to say that I can see positives in my situation, it's still there and it's still always going to be there. I just say that I'm at a comfortable place with my grief. I would never say that I'm over it or that like, yeah, I'm not grieving anymore. You're always going to grieve to a certain extent, but I'm at a comfortable stage with it now.
And isn't, I suppose, the trick is to kind of accept that. It's not about wanting to change your feelings.
Yeah.
It's about accepting your feelings.
Yeah.
And the best thing that the late Queen ever said was that grief is the price we pay for love.
And there's a lot of comfort in that, isn't it? You know, we're lucky that we had that love.
Do you know what? That little baby, boy or girl, and Lucky are very lucky to have you, because you are wise beyond your 26 years. I don't mean to sound patronising.
No, not at all.
But I've got a lot from this chat, and, you know, I think it's so important to have these conversations. Yeah. There's a beautiful part of your book that I would like to end the podcast on, as I think it'll be a comfort to anyone going through the loss of a loved one right now. In fact, would you mind reading it out? Yeah? This bit here.
I wish someone could have told me that it was all going to be okay, that I was going to survive this. I would have loved to know at that point that life after this was possible, because I was so sure that I'd never live a normal life again, that I'd never be happy. To look at what I've managed to make out of life now, and to look at how happy I am, it would have been so good to hear that this was possible, but I've had to go on to discover that.
Lottie Tomlinson, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Huge thanks to Lottie Tomlinson for such an honest and open and inspiring conversation today. I think the big takeaway for me is to remember that grief doesn't follow a set path, and it's really important to accept that there's no specific end date to it, which might be a way of finding peace with how you're feeling. Her book, Lucky Girl, is out now. Okay, now before we wrap up, I'm going to leave you with something I've been loving this week. It's actually, I could do an entire podcast on this, and it is Marks and Spencer's fashion, which is not something I ever thought I would say. And maybe it's my age, I don't know, but like, I always thought of M&S as slightly frumpy, and it is absolutely nailing it right now. And I mean, listen, you may be like, Bryony, we don't want to take fashion advice from you. Have you looked in the mirror at what you wear on any given day? And I'm talking to you right now on my sofa in a pair of jeans that have holes in them, a stained t-shirt that it's covered in coffee. I've just been amazed by some of the stuff. I bought this like fake like sheepskin coat thing, which I think is so chic. And also, you know, everyone's wearing those like red Mary Janes that look like Dorothy slippers. I bought some of those in red and then also in gold, because that's just how I roll. And also the great thing about M&S fashion is that it's pretty size inclusive, goes up to larger sizes, which we love, right? That's what I'm recommending. And also, this is, yes, can I just be clear? That's not an ad. And this is the part where I ask you to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. But I'm going to keep it fresh because I'm obsessed with Duolingo lately. I'm going to say it in Spanish. So this is... This is subscribe, rate, tell a friend in Spanish. Here we go. Suscríbete, califica, dile a una amiga. I'm back on Friday with a bonus edition of Life of Bryony, where Lottie and I will be answering your messages. So don't forget, you can WhatsApp me and even send me a voice note. All the contact details are in the show notes. See you Friday. Adios, amigos.